Well, I'm Hugh Ross, and I'm here with our visiting scholar, Leslie Wickman. And Leslie, you've been bringing up some really interesting topics with us here at Reasons to Believe. But one thing I know about you, you've had a lot of experience in physiology and space travel. You're with the aerospace industry a lot. Tell us, what are the challenges of trying to have people travel through interplanetary space?
Yeah,
I mean,
oh
that's
my
kind of
goodness.
the big excitement today,
Yeah.
sending people to Mars.
Right.
And, a lot of people say, I know some people want to send on a one-way trip, but
Right.
what are the challenges that we face there?
Yeah, it is an interesting topic because I think, there's a lot of excitement around space travel and whatnot. But when we look at what we've actually done so far, it's pretty minimal.
Yeah, going to the moon's one thing.
Exactly. Going to the moon and spending a few days is one thing, but even on the space station or on the Mir space station, the longest experience that we have in space is just a little bit over a year. And only a very small number of people have ever experienced that amount of time in space. And so even with that experience, though, we know that there are a lot of significant impacts on the human body that cause declining health. So things like
zero gravity you're talking
yeah,
about?
and zero gravity, and in an environment that is, well, it depends on the mission, of course, because in low Earth orbit you still have some protection from our magnetic
you're
field.
not having to worry about radiation.
Right, at least not to the extent we would in interplanetary travel. However, people have estimated that the astronauts that are in even low Earth orbit are exposed to a rate of radiation exposure 100 times more than what people on the surface of the Earth experience. So it is an increased rate, and but by and large, the biggest effect is the lack of gravity, or the zero gravity, microgravity, and so that impacts the human cardiovascular system. Your heart is not working as hard to pump blood up from your extremities against gravity. You have skeletal deterioration.
So what kind of bone mass loss are we looking at?
Well, it depends on the exercise protocol.
Okay.
But even with the most strenuous exercise protocol, we have not been able to stave off all bone loss. So basically what happens is because of the fact that your bone remodels itself according to the mechanical stresses that it experiences, you remove gravity and you're not having compression loads on your long bones or your postural bones, such as in the spine and whatnot. And so the protocol to try to stave off all of these problems, the cardiovascular deconditioning, the skeletal deterioration, and muscular atrophy, has been to prescribe about 4 hours of rigorous exercise each day. And that's a motivational problem. And even at that 4 hours, which usually doesn't get accomplished, you're still going to have some remaining effects.
And so what do? Try to attach bungee cords to you to simulate gravity? Is
Yeah,
that what they do?
exactly. So the most effective exercise so far has been treadmill running, where you're basically wearing a harness and attached with bungee cords to the treadmill to keep some compression loads on your body.
That's got to be an even greater motivational problem, because now you're not just running a treadmill, you got all this stuff attached to you.
Yes, exactly. And so it's definitely a motivational problem. In the Russian space program, they have tried various body loading devices that are even more demotivating, I think. For example, they've got a lower body negative pressure device that they've used that basically pulls a partial vacuum on your lower body. There's a seal around your waist, and pulls a partial vacuum on your lower body to try to draw the blood downward to get increased circulation. There are various proposals. In fact, one of the proposals when I was doing my dissertation research at NASA Ames was to build this lower body negative pressure chamber around a treadmill that would pull a partial vacuum on the lower body, and the seal at your waist would actually puts you in firmer contact with the treadmill while you're running. But absolutely, I mean, there are all these problems with motivation if you have to exercise many hours per day. I mean, most people have trouble being motivated to spend 1 hour a day exercising.
Or even 30 minutes.
Or even 30 minutes, exactly.
And that also means that the astronauts there don't have as much time to do their work.
Exactly. It impacts the schedule, it impacts rest time and downtime and all that sort of thing. And so then people will start asking, well, what about the big rotating space station that we saw in 2001, A Space Odyssey, right? Which is extremely expensive in terms of trying to build a large structure like that in space, launching
Well, let me
all
ask you a
materials.
question. I've looked at those proposals on how to get to Mars, having artificial gravity.
Right.
But unless you make the spaceship really big, you have a different gravity pull on your feet than you do on
That's
your
absolutely
head.
right.
So
yeah.
what's the problems if the gravity is different at your head than it is at your feet?
Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to kind of think about that, right? Because so the most common proposals for that are to say you have a habitable capsule at one end, and then you have a tether with a counterweight
right.
at the other end, and then you rotate about the center of mass
But you
of the
still
system.
got a problem.
You
that
still
you're-
have a problem because there's a gravity differential from your head to your feet. You've got greater gravity at your feet than you do at your head,
Right.
which essentially means that the blood is going to go to your feet.
And not to your head.
Exactly, and that you're going to probably pass out.
And you're not going to be that effective in doing your work.
Exactly. So there are all
Unless you make
kinds
the
of
thing, say,
really
20
long.
miles long, then it
crazy.
works.
Yeah, exactly, which is just impractical. So yeah, I mean, there is still some investigation into the possibility of having a tether with a countermass and then rotating on the trip, because we are talking about fairly long distances. I mean, if we do a conjunction class mission to Mars, the outbound leg would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 5 months, and then you'd stay on the surface for a period of time, but probably wouldn't necessarily time the conjunction for coming back. And so if at any other kind of random time, you have to allow about 18 months for transit.
Yeah, I've heard that in minimum 3 years for a return trip.
Yeah, well, or a total trip,
A total
round
trip,
trip,
right, yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
A few years ago, there was a trip that was being contemplated. I actually got a call to see if I might be interested in going. It was a flyby mission, and that flyby mission was, I think they were projecting 500 days for just that.
Mm-hmm.
And that wasn't even landing on the surface. That was just
Doing a
waving
trip
on
around.
the way by, essentially, yeah. So.
Well, I mean, when you're talking about Mars, it's not just a gravity problem.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just a gravity problem. I mean, there's ideas floating around out there about making Mars more livable, and one of the problems is the lack of gravity. I mean, Mars's gravity is about 3/8 of what Earth's gravity is. So
that's going to be a health issue, even if it's only 3/8.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not working as hard. Your heart's not working as hard. Your bones are not working as hard. Your muscles aren't working as hard. There are some things that you can do in a gravity field that you can't do in 0G, though. You can make people wear weights as they're moving around, and that has obviously some effect. But again, the motivation, it's like, do I really want to put those weights on today when I go out to do my job, or do I just want to have, a little more fun and be able to,
Now, what about the radiation problem?
Oh my gosh,
Because
yes.
once you get outside Earth's
You're right.
magnetosphere,
Absolutely.
it's not going to be like the space station.
That's exactly right. And so you're going to have a much higher regular dosage of radiation, both in transit as well as on the surface of Mars, because Mars has essentially no magnetic field and no atmosphere, very little atmosphere, to protect us from radiation. In fact, you've, I think, done some thinking and research about what that does to your digestive system.
Right.
And destroying the
Last thing you want is have a whole bunch of stomach and intestinal tumors when you're on the surface of Mars.
Exactly, yeah.
Now you got to do surgery.
Yeah,
So.
Exactly, yeah, and digestive problems to begin with, right? Destroying the good bacteria in your gut, and So
Well,
yeah.
everything you're telling me, Leslie, leads me to encourage you. Have they ever offered to send you to Mars? Please say no. Because we want you to come back.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your concern. I think I'd have a really hard time saying no if I was asked. But, what's interesting is there's some speculation that maybe middle-aged and older people would be best suited for spaceflight because...
Well, I've heard that too. Let's send somebody who's a senior citizen. They're going to die soon anyway.
Right, exactly.
So
the
if they die
radiation...
on Mars, what's the problem?
Yeah, exactly. The radiation doesn't have as much of a chance to have tumors develop over the long haul after radiation exposure. So if you send an older person, there's less time for them to develop cancer or other
On the other hand, if
life-threatening...
you send an older person, they probably aren't going to be able to function physically as well as
That's
somebody
true.
who's in their 20s.
That is true.
So there's a downside
right,
to that.
exactly.
And I'm not sure I'd be willing to volunteer by saying, well, you're going to die soon anyway, so why don't you die on Mars?
Right. I don't know. I think that might be kind of a neat epitaph.
Yeah, have an RIP there on Mars.
Exactly.
Well, this has really been great, Leslie, and all of you that are watching this, there's a ton of material that you get on reasons.org that Leslie has produced for us. Just go to reasons.org and search under Leslie Wickman. Thank you.